Prince Harry just got absolutely roasted on YouTube, and honestly, you need to see this to believe it. The Duke of Sussex sat down with comedian Hasan Minhaj for what was supposed to be a serious interview about his charity work. But what actually happened was a masterclass in public humiliation. We're talking awkward silences, forced laughter, and moments where Harry looked like he wanted to bolt straight out of that studio. This wasn't just an interview. This was a comedy roast disguised as a friendly chat, and Harry walked right into it. The clips that just dropped a few hours ago are spreading like wildfire across social media, and royal watchers everywhere are asking the same question. Has Prince Harry become so desperate for relevance that he's willing to let himself be mocked on camera? Because that's exactly what happened here. Hasan didn't hold back. He poked fun at Harry's failed attempts at an American accent. He brutally called out the prince's tone-deaf complaints about shopping at discount stores, and he asked questions that left Harry visibly squirming in his seat. But here's where it gets really interesting. Throughout this entire interview, you can see Harry caught between two worlds. He's trying so hard to be relatable, to be the casual American guy who just wants to fit in. But every single answer he gives reminds everyone that he's still that privileged royal who grew up in palaces. The disconnect is painful to watch, and Hasan knew exactly how to exploit it for maximum comedic effect. What makes this even more explosive is the timing. Just hours before this interview dropped, Harry and Meghan were spotted at the World Series, desperately seeking photo opportunities, while fans absolutely blasted them online. They just lost their PR person, and yet here they are on a full-court press trying to stay relevant. Sources close to the situation suggest this interview was supposed to rehabilitate Harry's image, to show him as funny and self-aware and down-to-earth. Instead, it might have done the exact opposite. The most devastating moments came when Hasan asked Harry what his kids think he does for work, and the prince genuinely couldn't answer. He stumbled, he deflected, and he revealed something far darker than anyone expected. His children are isolated, they don't understand their father's role, and they apparently don't even get to see other people very often. For a man who claims he left the royal family to give his kids a normal life, that admission was absolutely damning. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's break down exactly what happened in this interview. Moment by cringe-worthy moment, because the devil is in the details. From forced American accents to humiliating party tricks, from tone-deaf shopping complaints to questions Harry couldn't answer, this interview revealed more about Prince Harry's current state than any official statement ever could. And trust us, what it revealed isn't pretty. Let's talk about what led up to this interview, because the context makes everything so much worse. Just last night, hours before Harry sat down with Hasan Minhaj, he and Meghan showed up at the World Series in Los Angeles. They were front row, cameras everywhere, smiling for the press like they were actual A-list celebrities. But here's the thing, the fans weren't having it, at all. Social media exploded with anger when people realized that local LA Dodgers legends had been bumped from their usual seats to make room for the Sussexes. These were people who'd actually earned their place in that stadium, people who'd contributed to the team and the community, and they got demoted so Harry and Meghan could have their photo op. The backlash was swift and brutal, with fans calling them entitled, tone-deaf, and desperately thirsty for attention. And they're not wrong. Industry insiders have been whispering for weeks now that the Sussex brand is in serious trouble. Their Spotify deal crashed and burned. Their Netflix content hasn't delivered the numbers they promised, and just recently they lost yet another member of their PR team. That's not just bad luck, that's a pattern. When you can't keep professional publicists on your payroll, when experienced communications experts keep walking away from you, that tells you everything you need to know about what's happening behind closed doors. So there they were at the World Series, grinning for cameras while the internet roasted them alive, and then mere hours later, Harry appears on Hasan Minhaj's YouTube channel. The timing couldn't be more transparent. This is a couple on a full-court press, throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, desperately trying to stay relevant in a Hollywood landscape that's increasingly moving on without them. Sources close to their team suggest this interview was supposed to be Harry's redemption moment. The plan was apparently for him to come across as funny, relatable, and self-aware, to show Americans that he's one of them now, that he gets the culture and the humor. They wanted viral moments, but not the kind they actually got. They wanted people sharing clips because Harry was charming and likable, not because he was being publicly mocked. But here's what makes this whole situation even more fascinating. Harry agreed to do this interview knowing full well that Hasan Minhaj is a comedian, someone who made his name roasting politicians and celebrities on his Netflix show. Did Harry really think he'd get softball questions? Did he believe his royal status would protect him from the kind of sharp, cutting humor that Hasan is famous for? Or was he so desperate for any platform, any audience, any chance at relevance that he walked into this interview fully aware it might not go his way? The answer to that question becomes crystal clear the moment the interview actually starts. And trust us, it's not the answer Harry would want anyone to know. The cringe truly begins when Hasan asks Harry one simple question. How American are you? It seems innocent enough, right? Just a fun icebreaker to get the conversation flowing. But what follows is 5 straight minutes of Harry being systematically humiliated, and you can see it happening in real time on his face. First, Hasan asks if Harry drinks Coors Light. Harry says no, he doesn't. Strike one. Then Hasan asks if he wears shorts inside restaurants, and Harry actually admits he has chicken legs and nobody should see them. At least he's self-deprecating there, you have to give him that. But then comes the moment that breaks the internet. Hasan asks Harry to do an American accent. You can literally watch the panic flash across Harry's face. He tries to buy time, asking which part of America, as if that matters. Hasan doesn't let him off the hook. Anywhere, he says. Just do it. And then he gives Harry the most perfectly American sentence imaginable. I ordered breadsticks with ranch dressing at Applebee's. Harry has to repeat it. He's visibly sweating now, and he even admits it on camera. He says the words back, stumbling over ranch, fumbling with the emphasis on Applebee's, and the result is this bizarre hybrid accent that sounds neither British nor American, but something awkwardly in between. The crew in the background starts laughing. Not polite chuckling, but genuine laughter at how badly this is going. Hasan doesn't stop there. He pushes further, asking Harry to say, "Hey, do you like my Cybertruck?" And again, Harry tries, and again he fails spectacularly. The laughter from the crew gets louder. You can hear them losing it in the background, and Harry knows they're laughing at him, not with him. He even asks Hasan directly, "Is this encouraging or is this mocking me?" That question right there reveals everything. Harry knows he's being made fun of. He's not oblivious to what's happening, but he's trapped in this interview, committed to seeing it through, and he can't just walk out without looking even worse. So he sits there, getting more uncomfortable by the second, while Hasan keeps pushing. Then comes the yeehaw moment. Hasan wants Harry to do a proper cowboy yeehaw, and Harry absolutely refuses to commit. He gives this half-hearted attempt that sounds more like a question than an exclamation, and the crew loses it again. More laughter, more mocking, and Harry is just sitting there taking it. Finally, Harry breaks. He asks if this is a warm-up or if this is actually part of the interview. You can hear the irritation in his voice, the desperation to move past this humiliating segment and get to the serious topics he came here to discuss. But Hasan just smiles and says they're warming up, and you can see Harry's face fall as he realizes this torture isn't over yet. Here's where you really start to see Harry unravel. He's done with the games, done with the party tricks, and he wants to move on to what he considers the important stuff. His charity work, his foundation, the causes he cares about. You know, the things that might actually make him look good instead of like a performing monkey at a circus. But Hasan isn't letting him off that easy. The comedian suggests they do the yeehaw again, implying Harry didn't nail it the first time. And you can see something shift in Harry's demeanor. His jaw tightens, his smile becomes forced, and he says they're pretty good on yeehaw. It's a polite way of saying absolutely not, we're done here. But Hasan reads the room perfectly and pivots, saying, okay, let's get serious then. And this is where Harry makes a critical mistake. He immediately jumps on that, saying, yes, let's get serious, with this edge of relief in his voice, but Hasan catches him on it. The comedian playfully calls out how eager Harry is to move past the fun stuff, and suddenly Harry realizes he's been too obvious about his discomfort. So he backpedals hard, saying, no, of course we don't have to get serious, trying to seem chill and easygoing, even though everyone watching can tell he's absolutely not. Sources who've analyzed this interaction suggest Harry fundamentally misunderstood what this interview was going to be. He thought showing up on a comedian's YouTube channel would be this fun, lighthearted way to connect with younger American audiences. What he didn't anticipate was that the humor would be at his expense, that he'd be the punchline rather than part of the joke. And once he realized that, once it became clear Hasan was going to keep poking at his privilege and his awkwardness, Harry wanted out, but he couldn't get out. That's the thing about these interviews. Once you commit, once the cameras are rolling, you have to see it through. Walking out would create an even bigger scandal, would make him look thin-skinned and unable to take a joke. So Harry does what he's been trained to do his entire life. He puts on the smile, he plays along, and he endures the humiliation because the alternative is worse. What's fascinating is how different this is from how William would handle a similar situation. The future king simply wouldn't put himself in this position to begin with. He wouldn't sit down with a comedian known for roasting people, wouldn't subject himself to questions designed to make him look foolish. William understands that dignity sometimes means saying no to opportunities, even ones that might seem good for publicity. But Harry doesn't have that luxury anymore, or at least he doesn't think he does. He's so desperate to stay relevant, so hungry for any platform that will have him, that he'll endure being mocked on camera just to get his face out there. And that desperation is exactly what makes this whole interview so painful to watch. Now we get to the moment that absolutely destroyed Harry's entire attempt at relatability. Hasan sets this up brilliantly, telling Harry there was a moment in his book Spare that really shook him to his core. Harry has no idea what's coming. You can see him sitting up straighter, getting ready for what he thinks will be a serious, emotional discussion about his trauma or his struggles or his mental health journey. But Hasan isn't going there. Instead, he pulls out a quote from Spare about Harry's shopping habits, and this is where it gets absolutely brutal. Hasan reads, in this very serious tone, how Harry received a royal clothing allowance, but it was strictly for formal wear, suits and ties, ceremonial outfits. For his everyday casual looks, Harry had to go to TK Maxx, the discount store. He was particularly fond of their once-a-year sale when they'd be flushed with items from Gap or J.Crew that had just come out of season or were slightly damaged. The silence after Hasan finishes reading is deafening. Then he looks at Harry with mock sympathy and says, "Bro, I'm sorry you had to go through that." The crew absolutely loses it. They're laughing so hard you can hear it clearly on the recording, and Harry is just sitting there caught between wanting to laugh along and being genuinely embarrassed that his own words are being used to mock him. Because here's the thing, Harry actually wrote that in his book. He genuinely thought that was a relatable hardship, that people would read about a prince having to shop at a discount store and feel sympathy for him. He took something that millions of regular people do out of actual financial necessity and presented it as some kind of struggle he had to overcome. The tone deafness is staggering. Harry tries to recover, saying TK Maxx is now a special place with a special place in his memory. He's attempting to lean into the joke to show he can laugh at himself, but you can see the discomfort written all over his face. This isn't the kind of attention he wanted. This isn't making him look relatable, it's making him look privileged and out of touch. Hasan keeps twisting the knife, saying it could have been worse. It could have been Ross dressed for less. And then he delivers the final blow. "I'm just glad to see that you're on the other side of the discount rack now." It's said with a smile, with humor, but the message is crystal clear. You're rich, you're privileged, you've never actually struggled, and trying to pretend otherwise just makes you look ridiculous. Palace insiders who've seen this clip are reportedly mortified. This is exactly the kind of moment they spent years trying to prevent when Harry was still a working royal. They knew he had a tendency to say things that revealed just how disconnected he was from normal people's lives. But now he doesn't have those handlers, doesn't have anyone telling him that comparing his life to regular people's struggles is a terrible idea, and it shows. Let's talk about Harry's body language throughout this entire ordeal, because it tells a story his words never could. Every time Hasan lands a particularly cutting joke, you can see Harry's face do this thing where he laughs, but the laugh doesn't quite reach his eyes. It's the laugh of someone who knows they're being mocked, but can't afford to show they're bothered by it. It's painful to watch, honestly. Body language experts who've analyzed this footage are having a field day. They're pointing out how Harry's shoulders tense up whenever a joke lands, how he shifts in his seat when the conversation gets uncomfortable, how his hands move to his face when he's trying to buy time to formulate a response. These aren't the movements of someone comfortable and confident. These are the defensive gestures of someone who feels cornered. And here's what makes it even more fascinating. There are moments, brief flashes, where Harry actually seems likable. When he admits he has chicken legs and shouldn't wear shorts, when he genuinely laughs at one of Hasan's jokes, you can see glimpses of the person he might be when he's not so tightly wound. But those moments are immediately undercut by his obvious discomfort, his desperate need to steer the conversation toward topics he can control. Sources close to the situation suggest Harry thought this interview would be different. He's done serious sit-downs before, emotional conversations about mental health and royal life, and those generally go well for him. People sympathize with his struggles, they connect with his vulnerability. But comedy is a completely different beast. Comedy requires you to be genuinely comfortable making fun of yourself, and Harry simply isn't there yet. What's revealing is how he keeps trying to pivot to serious topics. Every few minutes he'll attempt to bring up his foundation work or his charity initiatives, clearly hoping Hasan will take the bait and let him talk about something meaningful. But Hasan isn't interested in giving Harry that platform, at least not without earning it first. And earning it means sitting through the roasting, taking the jokes, proving you can laugh at yourself before you get to promote your causes. The question everyone's asking now is whether this makes Harry more relatable or less. On one hand, seeing him squirm and struggle with humor could make him seem more human, more vulnerable. On the other hand, his obvious discomfort with being teased just reinforces how sheltered and privileged his upbringing was. Regular people deal with being mocked all the time. It's part of normal social interaction. But Harry seems genuinely thrown by it, like nobody's ever really made fun of him to his face before. And maybe they haven't. Maybe that's what happens when you grow up as a prince, surrounded by people who would never dare to truly laugh at you rather than with you. Maybe that's why this interview feels so jarring, because it's exposing Harry to something he's never really experienced before. Real criticism, real mockery, without the safety net of royal protection. Then Hasan drops what might be the most loaded question of the entire interview. Are you going to become a US citizen? It's simple, it's direct, and it immediately puts Harry in an impossible position. Because no matter how he answers this, he loses. Watch Harry's face when the question lands. There's this split second of panic, this visible calculation happening behind his eyes as he tries to figure out the safest response. If he says yes, he's essentially renouncing his British identity, confirming he's never going back to the UK, burning whatever bridges might still exist with the royal family. If he says no, he's admitting he doesn't really belong in America either, that he's just here temporarily, that this whole California adventure might not be permanent. So he does what politicians do. He gives a non-answer that sounds like an answer. He says there are no plans to become a US citizen at this point. At this point, those 3 words are doing an enormous amount of work in that sentence. They leave the door open for literally anything to happen in the future, while committing to absolutely nothing in the present. Hasan, to his credit, immediately calls this out. He notes that it's not a yes and it's not a no, and Harry just sits there knowing he's been caught in his careful deflection but unable to give a more direct response without creating an international incident. Because make no mistake, Harry's citizenship status is a massive deal on both sides of the Atlantic. In Britain, there's already significant resentment about Harry abandoning his duties and moving to America while still technically being a prince. If he formally became an American citizen, that would feel like the ultimate betrayal to many Brits. He'd be choosing America over the country of his birth, over his heritage, over everything his grandmother and father represent. The backlash would be nuclear. But in America, his refusal to commit to citizenship makes him look like he's not really invested in his new home. He's been living here for 5 years now, his kids are being raised here, he's built his life and his business ventures here. So why the hesitation? What's holding him back? The obvious answer is that he's keeping his options open, maintaining the possibility of a return to the UK if things don't work out in California. And honestly, can you blame him? Look at how things are going. His entertainment deals are falling apart. His public image is deteriorating. His attempts to stay relevant keep backfiring. Industry insiders are whispering that Harry and Meghan might have seriously miscalculated their value in the American marketplace. They thought being royal would be enough, that their titles and their drama would keep them in demand indefinitely. But Hollywood is fickle, and audiences are already moving on. So Harry hedges his bets. He doesn't commit to America, but he doesn't close the door on it either. He stays in this awkward liminal space, not fully British anymore, but not fully American either. A man without a country, desperate to belong somewhere but unable to fully commit to anywhere. And that desperation is written all over his face. Now we arrive at the most devastating question of the entire interview, the moment that reveals more about Harry's current life than he probably wanted anyone to know. Hasan asks a question that should be simple for any parent to answer. What do your kids think you do for work? Harry completely freezes. You can see him trying to formulate an answer, his mouth opening and closing, his brain clearly scrambling for something to say, and the silence stretches on just a beat too long enough that everyone watching knows he doesn't have a good answer prepared. Finally, he manages to say that his kids know they help other people, but even as he's saying it, you can tell he's not convinced by his own response. Hasan pushes harder, asking what Archie and Lilibet think Dad does when he goes to work. And here's where it gets really uncomfortable. Harry tries to deflect by talking about how his daughter came to the office yesterday, and she thinks he just sits there on video calls saying hi to people. He tries to make it cute, tries to make it funny, but what he's actually revealing is deeply concerning. His kids don't understand what he does. They don't have a clear picture of their father's role in the world. And more than that, Harry himself seems unable to articulate what exactly his job is. Because what is his job? He's not a working royal anymore. He's not really a successful content creator. His charity work exists, sure, but how much of his day-to-day life is actually spent on meaningful charitable activities versus trying to stay relevant in Hollywood? But the most chilling part comes when Harry says his kids are fascinated to see other people. Think about that phrase for a second. They're fascinated to see other people. That implies they don't see other people very often. These children are growing up isolated, sheltered to an extreme degree, and Harry just admitted it on camera without seeming to realize how it sounds. He tries to frame it as protecting his kids, and sure, celebrity children need some level of privacy and security, but there's protecting your kids, and then there's isolating them from normal human interaction. And based on Harry's own words, it sounds like Archie and Lilibet fall into the latter category. They apparently get so excited to see other people on video calls that they barge in and jump on their dad's lap just to say hi to strangers on a screen. Here's the kicker though. Harry claims he left the royal family to give his children a normal life, to spare them from the constraints and pressures he grew up with. But what he's describing doesn't sound normal at all. It sounds like they're just as isolated as he was, maybe even more so. At least Harry got to see his extended family, got to interact with staff and officials and other children at school. What do Archie and Lilibet have? A compound in Montecito, and video calls with strangers. The question Hasan didn't ask, but everyone's thinking is this: do Archie and Lilibet even know their grandfather is the king? As if Harry hadn't already revealed enough about how disconnected he is from reality, the interview continues to expose just how out of touch he really is with both British and American culture. Hasan tries to lighten the mood with some pop culture questions, and Harry absolutely bombs every single one of them. They do this rapid-fire segment where Hasan asks quick questions expecting quick answers, and Harry just sits there looking confused more often than not. When asked about who should play the next James Bond, Harry has absolutely no opinion. None. He can't name a single actor, can't engage with the question at all. This is one of the most iconic British cultural touchstones, a role that every British actor dreams about, and Harry has nothing to say about it. Then Hasan brings up Taylor Swift and Charlie XCX, two of the biggest names in music right now, and you can see the complete blankness on Harry's face. He has no idea what Hasan is talking about. Zero recognition. These are artists who dominate American pop culture, who are impossible to avoid if you're even remotely plugged into mainstream media, and Harry is just completely lost. What this reveals is fascinating, and honestly kind of sad. Harry doesn't belong to British culture anymore. He's rejected that, moved away from it, criticized it publicly in his book and his interviews, but he also hasn't successfully integrated into American culture. He's living in California, but he's not really living in California, if that makes sense. He's in this bubble, this isolated world where he doesn't watch the shows everyone's watching, doesn't listen to the music everyone's listening to, doesn't participate in the cultural conversations happening around him. Sources in the entertainment industry have been saying this for months now. Harry and Meghan don't actually understand Hollywood. They thought their royal status would be enough, that they could just show up and be treated like A-list celebrities without putting in the work to understand the industry. But Hollywood doesn't work that way. You need to be plugged in, you need to know the players, you need to understand what's trending and what's relevant, and Harry clearly doesn't. Compare this to how other British celebrities have successfully transitioned to American stardom. James Corden understood American pop culture inside and out. John Oliver built his entire show around dissecting American society and politics. Even Piers Morgan, love him or hate him, knows exactly what Americans care about and how to engage with it. But Harry, he's floating in this weird space between two worlds, belonging to neither. The James Bond moment is particularly telling because it shows Harry has even lost touch with his British identity. A true Brit would have opinions about Bond, would engage with that conversation. But Harry can't, or won't. He's neither British enough to care about Bond, nor American enough to know who Taylor Swift is collaborating with. He's just this untethered person, disconnected from both cultures, trying desperately to figure out where he fits in a world that's increasingly moving on without him. So what does this interview really tell us about where Prince Harry is right now? Strip away the awkward laughs and the uncomfortable moments, and what you're left with is a portrait of a man who's fundamentally lost. He's not British anymore, but he's not American either. He's not a working royal, but he's not successfully reinvented himself as anything else. He's just Harry, floating in this weird liminal space, desperate for relevance but unable to figure out how to achieve it. The willingness to sit through this interview, to let himself be mocked and laughed at on camera, speaks volumes about his current situation. A few years ago, when Harry and Meghan first moved to California, they had real power. They had the Oprah interview, they had massive deals with Spotify and Netflix, they had the world's attention. They could have been selective about which platforms they appeared on, which interviews they gave. But now Harry's showing up on YouTube channels, taking whatever media opportunities he can get, even if it means being the butt of the joke. Compare this to Prince William. The future king doesn't need to do comedy interviews to stay relevant. He doesn't need to prove he can take a joke or show how down-to-earth he is. He just shows up, does his royal duties with dignity and grace, and lets his work speak for itself. He's not scrambling for attention because he doesn't need to. His position is secure, his future is certain, and his identity is solid. But Harry's out here doing American accents for laughs, admitting he can't explain to his own children what he does for work, and revealing just how isolated his family has become. Industry insiders are already calling this interview a disaster, saying it exposed Harry's desperation rather than rehabilitating his image. The clips going viral aren't the ones that make him look good. They're the ones that make him look pathetic. And maybe that's the saddest part of all this. Harry genuinely seems to think these appearances are helping him, that staying in the public eye by any means necessary is better than fading into obscurity. But what he doesn't understand is that there are worse things than being forgotten. Being remembered as a joke, as the prince who became Hollywood's court jester, might actually be worse than just quietly living your life away from the cameras. The question now is whether Harry will learn from this, whether he'll recognize that this approach isn't working and try something different, or will he keep chasing relevance, keep accepting interview invitations from anyone who'll have him, keep letting himself be mocked in pursuit of attention he's never going to recapture. Only time will tell, but based on this interview, things aren't looking good. So what do you think? Has Harry become desperate enough to accept any publicity, even if it means being laughed at, or is he genuinely trying to reinvent himself and just failing spectacularly? Drop your thoughts below, like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video is waiting, and you won't believe what's coming next.